artistic battle, a moral battle, and we've had to come to Venice to fight it, because we can't fight it in Chicago.
What can confuse moral rights is by making a marriage between the proliferation of American films in the European marketplace and this discussion of boycotts and things like that. You cannot join these two issues because they are separate issues.
Here in Europe, cinema is dying.
In Europe, in Latin America, in Africa.
Is it the fault of the American industry?
No, it's very complex.
Oddly enough, I think separate issues being talked about here. You know, one is, of course, the position that many of our European colleagues feel about the predominance of American product and what that's doing to their industry. And the second is adding to this movement that's gaining strength in the States now of moral rights for all directors all over the world.
Oh, Fred Zinnemann was told by his doctors not to take this trip, that he could not do it, and they forbade him to do it. And I asked him about it when we left. I said, well, he said, you know, 50 years ago this same thing started, and we got together. And I said, here you are 50 years later, and I said, 50 years from now, you and I won't be here, but somebody's going to be here, and the problem is probably going to be basically the same. It's going to be money, profit, greed against art. And
this is not publicity. This documentary is being made for, you know, a great and difficult and confusing cause, the artist's rights, and that's why I agreed with Dan to let him do these little moments.
This is totally my opinion as to what happened in 1993, and I'm sure it has implications on what we see or don't see on television or the theaters.
Look to you forget that you have to look to the camera.
Oh yes.
You don't shoot from too many per time.
No.
Short, concise, essential.
Essential. Io vi saluto. Ciao. We see later.
Yes.
I call of you.
When you have the time, I would love to talk to you for a little bit.
Of course.
So I can
Thank you very much. Thank you. Goodbye. Thank you for coming.
I have a very small car, but I can give you a ride because we are going to the same hotel.
Oh, that's very kind. Yes.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.
It's a very modest car, but anyhow, it will drive you at home.
except for this authors meeting, there is no one place for a director to meet and talk. Because here you don't talk. That's the main thing. You don't communicate.
Rush back and forth.
You run one place, you see meet. It's a public relation place. It's like when you go to a fair and then you start talking with are we going to make this or that? And then I think after the festival, then you maybe call and say, well, let's have one day to talk.
In the street, but now it's quite different because they do walk in the streets, most of the people, when they're not in such a violent atmosphere like here or in Cannes, which is even much worse with all these photographers. I mean, the violence which these photographers express when they're all standing there and screaming. I mean, Spielberg had a chance to have a taste of that. I mean, a festival director always has this problem, because you have to give something to the journalists. He needed to have the stars too, but that wasn't his main interest in doing it, because he's really involved in all these problems. I mean, he likes to get in the problems, and since he had this position, he wanted to make a contribution, because he's just being director for 2 years now, and this is the last year, so he doesn't have any personal interest. It's really, he's been doing it because he knows he's the one who can do it, and he's the one who doesn't, think, American films are the devil, and so, of course, which is a stupid position. He's under stress here, of course. He's really under stress. And on the other side, he does have the passion. That's what made him an incredible filmmaker, and that's what helped makes him a good organizer, although everything is not working here, but a lot of things are not working. It's not his responsibility because it's many years, you know, that they haven't been doing. And so even if things don't work, I mean, he's there. He's there for the people, he's there for his guests, he's there for the journalists, and that shows that he has the passion.
Se a me un giornale francese mi chiede la Tina Turner alla Biennale, non gliela posso dare con Pontecorvo.
Hai capito? E allora? C'è la mafia anche qua dentro, tra i fotografi, cazzo. Diglielo a mamma.
And another thing is the film festival. Film festivals are mostly for journalists, for professionals to a certain extent, and in certain cases like the Cannes Film Festival for business. And if you're a producer or a distributor and you have to see, well, is it worth it?
La voglia di criticare è sempre tanta da parte di tutti. L'altro anno invece lo si attaccava perché non c'era il cinema americano. Quest'anno che ne ha messi 3 in concorso, ma altri fuori concorso, dice ma adesso ce n'è troppo.
Has he been having a difficult time with the bureaucracy? A lot of where does this problem specifically come from? From the politicians or the bureau?
No, just the bureaucracy. No one does anything, in fact. All the time you receive a lot of promises, a lot of wishes, but no one moves.
Finalmente ci sono via.
Finalmente siamo arrivati. Mario, come stai? Dimmi che c'è il posto per i tuoi lati.
Grazie. Fa questa assisi, dal tuo punto di vista.
Perché Gillo appartiene a una generazione della quale io sono, come dire, una frangia, che crede ancora molto nell'importanza degli autori.
In che senso l'importanza? L'autore non ha più importanza oggi?
Ma oggi si tende, ma non solo oggi, a decretare la morte dell'autore, la scomparsa dell'autore.
We are here finally on something called moral rights, but we are not supposed to use the word today.
No?
No, because it would frighten certain people, producers and distributors and television stations and that kind of stuff. But
is it possible to unite artists on moral rights on a global basis?
I think it's the only thing you can unite them on.
Because if an author is sure that his work, as he conceived it, is shown to the public, his moral right is protected without any manipulation, without any variation of his work. And this is the basis for freedom. It is very important that the moral rights are protected in Europe, in the United States, in Japan, in Asia, in Africa, all over the world.
Gabrielle, perché fa questo Assisi dal tuo punto di vista, Gillo? Cos'è la sua intenzione?
Io credo che la prima cosa sia quella di cercare di aiutare un po' il cinema d'autore senza staccarlo dal contesto del pubblico. Il problema oggi, credo, del cinema sia quello di trovare una linea autoriale, cioè d'arte, senza perdere pubblico. Questa è una delle cose, credo, uno dei problemi più importanti che dobbiamo affrontare.
I have no idea what it's about. I'll let you know in a few. No, let us start, right, and then I'll be able to do that much better.
Okay.
Europa, Bardem, Spagna, Enrico, Francia. Questa inedita, nascente unità degli autori è una vera forza concreta. Una forza, io credo, molto più grande di quanto noi stessi possiamo immaginare. Ma noi non dobbiamo soltanto preoccuparci del cinema come forma di espressione artistica. Anche nel cinema di grande comunicazione popolare, nel cosiddetto cinema commerciale o di consumo, dobbiamo combattere la tendenza alla standardizzazione.
Le nuove tecnologie dell'informatica e dell'elettronica, che avevano tutte le potenzialità per diventare uno straordinario mezzo per la emersione e per la moltiplicazione delle voci, per lo scambio delle esperienze fra i popoli e fra le culture, si sono trasformate invece in immense concentrazioni che producono e riproducono fiumi di immagini che parlano sempre di più e dicono sempre di meno.
As you know, I'm a witness of making films for 50 years. And I'm a veteran of many battles of this sort. 50 years ago, we had a great crisis in Hollywood when the studios were becoming more and more powerful. And creative people had a very difficult time. And at that time, people like Vito, Frank Capra, George Stevens, and many others got together. And because they were the most important directors and the studios could not do without them, they were able to organize the Directors Guild of America to organize in the same way where there is not too much rhetoric, too much verbal indignation, but a cold-blooded approach to exactly what action to take. And I hope with the illustrious company here, something may happen the next couple of days that will lead us to make some decisions which will help us to break the strangulation which is happening inexorably. And we could say, domani è troppo tardi. We have to be very, very quick about it. Thank you very much.
We're here trying to fight a battle, an artistic battle, a moral battle, and we've had to come to Venice to fight it because we can't fight it in Chicago. The American cinema and pocketbook dominates the film world now, as we all know. And the problem we have is that it's the old war horses that are here saying we should protect our own rights. And the dichotomy of that is that the young directors, the young artists who want to come up, they will do anything to be heard or seen. And consequently, they are exploited by the money that gives them their start.
I mean, really, as a filmmakers, you're just really trying to stay alive out there. I mean, it is very difficult to make a movie. It is very difficult to make a good movie. Whether you've got a lot of money or you don't have a lot of money, it's hard because you're fighting yourself all the time. And I look forward to being informed about the complexity of issues in Europe, which are extremely new to me, and at times different to the American problems. Then there are overlaps. We better get to work soon.
La cultura non è una merce come le altre, ha diritto ad un suo specifico statuto.
Non è la nostra una lotta di protezione, protezionistica, vecchio tipo, è una lotta che punta a far esistere le culture, le identità dei popoli di tutto il mondo.
I think the idea of preserving cultural heritage is so important because it's our knowledge. If we cannot create anything for the future if we don't know what we have behind us, what has created our minds, our ways of thinking. We are products of our parents and grandparents and all the way back. What have dictators done through all the times? They have burnt books. Today it's almost the same. If people do not have the access to films, to the film heritage, it's like burning books to us.
An occasion like this is an important and historic occasion where you start to get directors together from all over the world. Now, obviously, you get a lot of rhetoric at something like this, and rhetoric is not going to solve this problem because some of these problems are purely practical. We know they're practical in the States. It doesn't have to do with philosophy, it has to do with practicality. We have to find a real practical way to approach this, and one little step at a time is what we have to do. As far as what we're going to do to address the world cinema situation, where you have really a tragedy in countries that were producing great films in the 60s and 70s and have no film industry left anymore, that's a tragedy for Americans. What are you going to do to keep European cinema alive? You can't kill American cinema to keep it alive. That's not going to fix it. You've got to do something else, something better. What are you going to do to have more moral rights? Argue with guys who own movies? No, that's not going to do it either.
Do you foresee in the future, especially in films that have great, let's say, ideological or historical importance, eventually those films being bought, as those film libraries are sold all over the world, those films with those important historical statements perhaps being revised, and that being a grand tragedy somewhere in the future?
Well, I want to be optimistic about this rather than pessimistic, but certainly it could happen. I mean, with the way the United States copyright law reads, we say this is a joke, but it's not a joke. The Sony Corporation is the author of Bridge on the River Kwai. That's the way the copyright law reads. So as a result, they can alter that anytime and any place they want to. I don't think they're going to. I have a lot of faith in the Sony Corporation, but they certainly could, and I'm not comfortable with the fact that they could.
Theoretically, they could.
Yeah.
All the filmmakers I can see on the platform, they are all very, very realistic people. As always, the artists are the most realistic people, and they know where the money is, they know how to get it back, they know how to survive, because if you didn't know that, if you were an idealist, you'd be sunk. Well, it's complicated because there is a sense in which there is a sense in which it's art, and there's a sense in which it's commerce, and the people who are here are all people who like to live in the middle. They like to, you like to do work that's individual and eccentric and interesting, and you choose to work in an industry that is very tough and competitive and has all those economic laws. I mean, that's sort of the fun of it. And if you said to the people here, well, look, you can go and make little protected films somewhere, if you ask Ivan Reitman, he wouldn't want to go and make art films. That's the fun lies in somehow engaging with large audiences and engaging with the studios.
I do make art films.
Sorry?
I do make art films.
Yeah, yes, well, that's your problem, What you've got to do is get down to making these big blockbusters, then you'll sort yourself out. It's very complicated. You walk down that line.
There wasn't, especially for English Canadians, there's no language difference between America. And so we watch American films, we read American magazines, and we watch an extraordinary amount of American television. And so I was always criticized for making American movies. I said, well, I don't make American movies, I make Canadian movies. I was born here, and whatever I am, I wasn't born here, but I grew up here. Whatever I am is really what I'm reflecting. And I think I can really focus on the fears of Europeans. I think the issue, though, is not really American domination of the business. It's American cultural domination. It's not the major film studios. It's really the fact that as a result of television, we have this great homogenization of culture. So you suddenly, if you go to Japan, which I did about 2 weeks ago, you realize that young Japanese are very similar to young Americans. They're much more like young Americans are than what their tradition was 50 years ago. And I think that's true, of course, even more so in all the European countries. Moral rights, authors' rights, whatever a film author is, which, I really believe that film of all the sort of cultural things is a real group effort. I mean, yes, there is a director that sort of dominates the proceedings to a great extent, right. But without the contribution, obviously, of the writer, the cinematographer, of the costumer, everything really contributes to it. So it's a little bit more. But I think our needs in America are quite clear because there are no, unless you have a contractual right to final cut and those kinds of things, really your work can be totally reused in any kinds of forms, and I'm totally against that, and as I think most filmmakers are. Now the Europeans seem to have that right already, even more rights than we're asking for from Congress right now. Yeah. all these interviews, all these talking heads.
Exactly.
That's the problem. That's all it is.
Hai visto l'Assisi stamattina, cosa ti ha colpito di più di questa Assisi?
Beh, colpito non è una parola, spero che saremo colpiti dai risultati. Per ora stamattina c'era quello che si sapeva, c'è una grande partecipazione di autori di tutti i continenti, che è un evento storico perché non era mai successo, non solo nella storia del cinema, ma nella storia delle lettere, delle arti, quindi è importante per questo. Speriamo che domani, dopo queste 2 giornate di lavoro, si possa arrivare a una sintesi che sia chiara anche a chi non è del settore.
Cosa era l'intenzione di Gillo e voi?
Ma la nostra intenzione è di parlare dei diritti dell'autore non in quanto soltanto dell'autore, ma in quanto diritti del pubblico. Poi sono gli stessi, perché se il pubblico italiano, per esempio, è defraudato di tutti i film del terzo mondo, africani, ma anche dei film francesi, tedeschi, inglesi che non riusciamo a vedere, perché il mercato è tutto occupato dal cinema americano. E anche vogliamo difendere, perciò c'è la presenza degli autori americani e anche i diritti del pubblico americano che è defraudato di tutti i film europei che non vede e che non vedrà mai.
This Assisi here that you went to, you came all the way from London because you obviously believed in this.
Of course, otherwise I wouldn't have come.
What was your feeling on it tonight?
I can't tell. I can't tell. It was interesting. It was interesting to hear these people talking, but basically it's talk, and what we need is action. Well, the importance very simply is it's a question of heritage. The films, particularly the really great films that were made, are a part of our cultural heritage, our past. And if you destroy your past, then you maybe never know your future, because you begin to lose your identity, you lose your cultural background. And films today are as much part of our culture as paintings or novels, or perhaps even more so. So that if you begin to change films or mutilate them, you destroy the original intention of the man who made the film. And it's a false testimony. On one film I made, From Here to Eternity, they speeded it up a bit. And as a result, the soldier, instead of walking like men, walk like ballerinas.
Can you do anything about it right now, Fred?
If I had, I would have done it long ago, but I can't.
How are you blocked? It's just simply...
Well, there's nothing you can do, because if you don't have the copyright, if you don't own the picture...
Who owns your picture?
I don't know.
You don't know?
I don't know. It's changes. They sell it to somebody else, and you can't even follow it, because you could spend your life trying to figure it out.
Ma io credo che abbia ragione Fred Zinnemann, è giusto ed è molto tenero che si lamenti di questo e che abbia paura di questo. Però, parlando proprio del cinema di Zinnemann, del cinema hollywoodiano, sia pure di autore, di registi importanti, e questi registi hanno fatto film nei quali hanno sicuramente tradito le sceneggiature dei loro scrittori, ma credo che anzi questa possibilità di mutare, la mutazione non solo del cinema ma dei singoli film, sia una delle possibilità più affascinanti che ci riserva l'artista che prima di Warhol ha cambiato l'arte moderna. Marcel Duchamp ha fatto questo, ha cambiato la Mona Lisa. Naturalmente Mona Lisa è ancora lì, la Gioconda è ancora lì al Louvre, però Duchamp ha usato la Mona Lisa per un suo quadro.
It starts almost from the night of the world premiere of a film, and from that point on, the debasement of the film itself as it goes into wide distribution with prints which are abominable, into all kinds of other formats. And all along the way, there are people who own the rights to these films. There are people there who are doing the work on them with complete disregard to the wishes of the director. For example, a film can be done and is graded exactly the way you want it. The lab gets it perfect, the cameraman's happy, the director's happy. Then it turns out that the studio says, well, you know, it's a little dark, and we have to think about all those theaters somewhere or other that they don't have bright enough projection. So the implication is that you're supposed to lighten up your film so that it shows well in these miserable theaters in some, you know, fifth-rate mall somewhere. Now, that's a crazy way of approaching anything. That is something that, you know, that to me, that's all. That the grading of a film is part of the final cut, and the same you get into the same sort of problem with things that happen to a film, you know, panning and scanning and all the rest of it, and you're not even asked, and that should not be. So that to me is a part of artists' rights, but it's also a part of quality control. After a point, you can't go on policing everything because it's, you know, it's just a second.
How it goes this morning? Enough well, but what is important in this kind of things is not a general assembly, but the group of works. The group of works were to study something extremely unexplored and new. That means what we can do now that the union, the mondial union of authors, grow up. This gives enormous possibility. Perhaps we make illusion. I think is enormous. But in any case, we never try. Now we can try.
Keith, do you have some questions for Gillo? No, Gillo knows all the answers, and I have great faith and trust in him.
If we build up, as I proposed this morning, and I hope the people vote, if we create the mondial union of authors, we need even a permanent secretariat of them with garanti, come si dice? Guarantor.
Big stars.
No, not big stars. No.
Important Nobel Prize winners.
Nobel Prize, writers, directors, as guarantee, and a little operative group here to do things.
The fact of this meeting is very important.
What are you trying to do with this meeting?
Yes, I hope consciousness that the situation is very, very bad.
How?
Because many national cinema industries in different countries are dying.
Here in Europe, cinema is dying?
In Europe, in Latin America, in Africa.
Is it the fault of the American industry?
No, it's very complex. Very complex. It's not. There is no one reason. Yes, there is one reason. The first reason, or the main reason, is that in the different countries, the governments and the opinion has not the consciousness of the danger, and has not the feeling that cinema is a real art, and cinema is very fragile, is in danger. It's the main reason. They have no consciousness, they have no real interest. I mean, the ministers, the governments in many countries. And in these conditions, American industry has a free way.
Demandons que tous les pays négociateurs du GATT reconnaissent le droit moral aux auteurs d'œuvres cinématographiques et audiovisuelles. Nous, auteurs du monde entier, demandons dans l'accord GATT relatif aux services, accord GATS, une clause d'exception culturelle applicable aux services audiovisuels, générale et illimitée, ainsi qu'il suit. Rien n'empêchera un pays membre du GATT d'adopter ou d'appliquer des mesures réglementant la fourniture de services audiovisuels en vertu de politiques destinées à préserver ou à promouvoir les identités culturelles subnationales, nationales ou régionales. Ah, c'est tout.
C'est fini?
Oui.
Bien, oui, c'est un document très fort.
What's going on here in this commission here?
Well, it's been in the first group of this particular committee that we've been looking at the work this morning. Basically, they are looking at the whole area of authorial rights, how they differ between the copyright legislations and the authorial rights legislations of Europe, and how the GATT agreement may impinge upon arrangements which are made within states and between states.
Well, what is the Americans' problem here?
Well, the Americans' problem, I think, basically is they want to have a free market. They want to say, look, it's a competitive element. You know, we need to be able to sell as freely as possible. Right. But of course, they're only selling commodity in a single language.
In GATT, the American film industry is concerned about the subsidies and setting up quota systems. That's the basic thing.
Basically,
and so they're fighting with the Europeans, saying you can't subsidize and set up quotas to
because that's a barrier to free trade. That's the American position.
That's a simple thing here.
Yeah. But what the Europeans are saying is, look, the Americans have got 80% of the market. Okay. We understand that our quota system probably stops them from getting 87% of the market or 92% of the market, but at the same time we still feel that we ought to have 20% of our own market, since you give us nothing of yours. That's the basic problem.
But then how does authors' rights and moral rights in the U.S. and Europe fit into this?
Well, it's not really the same issue at all. Oh, right. That's a totally separate issue, which I think has in some ways confused this particular grouping.
If you make a Belgian film, you cannot get from the market, even if you have success, $1 million more all the expenses to bring the film, you know, distribution, promotion and everything. So it's impossible to make a film in a market like the Belgian market. So the state must help the director and the producer to make a Belgian film. So we make about 4 or 5 films a year.
So, but then we have films state-controlled.
No.
Controlled by the bureaucrats and the politicians.
Well, it is, you're right, and there is one of the main big problems that we are facing here in Europe, and it is true that it's a very big preoccupation for directors. It's very difficult to have state help without a minimum of control, and you always have the danger that the commission is political or is not political. It is absolutely true.
We sat around after the first that first opening session. Stephen Frears, Sidney Pollack, Peter Weir, and myself, and a few others, and they said, you know, we're the girls in the cake. You know, we come up and we say hi, and all the photographers take our picture, and then they go into the back rooms with the cigar smoke-filled rooms.
I think we non-European filmmakers who were here, particularly Americans, were window dressing. I believe we were here
cautiously on the part of Gillo.
Yeah. I like Gillo, but I'm not going to lie about it. That's what I think we were. I think we were there for... I've said this to Gillo, and he disagrees with me strongly.
No, I became furious for this. Right. It's an injustice. I don't like it.
Gillo, scusa, si pulisce tutto fra 2 minuti.
Va bene.
Lascia andare.
Solo un secondo solo. Une bataille très dure, vraiment il faut le dire, très dure, s'organise. Et même je dois dire par expérience que j'ai rarement vu une bataille d'une telle brutalité, non pas par des coups, mais d'une telle brutalité verbale venant en particulier de l'industrie américaine.
Et moi je réponds simplement, regardons les faits, les œuvres américaines occupent 80% des écrans européens. les œuvres européennes, moins de 2% des écrans américains. Où sont les barrières? Où est le protectionnisme?
Many years ago in a Hollywood restaurant, a young American director approached a famous Italian director whose film had won a Golden Lion Award. The American director told the Italian director that this was one of the reasons that he wished to become a filmmaker. Years passed, and the young director achieved some success. And then their paths crossed again due to an issue that was critical to both men, the integrity of film art. This issue was so important that the Italian director gathered up auction items, Fellini scripts and paintings of peacocks and Monica Vita's dress from Modesty Blaze, Marcel Carne's scripts, and his own Golden Lion Award, which he sent to America so that it could be auctioned to raise money for this important cause. Who could care so much that he would give away his Golden Lion? As we all now know, that Italian director is Gillo Pontecorvo. And the issue that we're speaking about today, and have been speaking about for many years now, at least I have in my country, is the moral rights or authors' rights. I was the young American director, and I purchased Pontecorvo's Golden Lion, not for possession, I didn't want to keep it, but for safekeeping, because I know that you cannot buy artistry. You cannot own the soul of the artist. Please remember that we as artists support your fight as artists, and that is why 168 top American writers and directors signed the Declaration of Solidarity. As American writers and directors, one of the many, and one of many film and television producing countries, we are deeply convinced of the free right of each people and its authors to express themselves, and through that expression to define their own cultural identity. Gillo? Gillo, I give you back your Golden Lion as a symbol of true authorship.
Please.
I'll make sure you get it back. You're getting this back. It's 6,000 miles to get it back. Anyway, viva moral rights. Thank you very much.
And something very, very huge as far as symbolism, of course, occurred here. And because of the strength of your conviction and will, a symbol of your artistry went across the ocean. Many, many miles. Steven Spielberg brought it back, and we've kept it in safekeeping, and now here it is. Finally, it's returned to you.
Thank you. But I prefer if Spielberg keep it.
It's your authorship. You can't purchase authorship.
All right.
You can't. But your will and your conviction really showed in your wonderful, gracious gesture to America.
Thank you very much. Ciao, grazie. Ciao, Kit. Ciao, ancora. Arrivederci.
And it was really not so much to protect ourselves, because we've all achieved the level of success where in our contracts today we can prevent colorization, time compression, and all of the all of the atrocities that
everybody else has to suffer
to be a filmmaker in America today. So we're fighting on behalf of everybody else who doesn't have our negotiated rights, because we've got these power broker agents running around demanding these things for us. But 90% of everybody else, you know, who makes movies, their films are owned by the copyright holders. And the copyright holders often, not all of them, to be fair, but a lot of them look at film like a slot machine. You put in a quarter and you hope to pull the arm and $1 comes out. And they're very happy not acknowledging film as a form of art, but they're very, very happy looking at film as big business, like a commodity. And that goes against the grain of everything that any filmmaker ever produced or directed in his life or wrote in his or her life. So all the directors who are now deceased have no one standing up for them. The Capras of the world, the Hustons of the world, the John Fords, the Howard Hawks, the Alfred Hitchcocks. What can confuse moral rights is by making a marriage between the proliferation of American films in the European marketplace and this discussion of boycotts and things like that. You cannot join these two issues because they are separate issues. You know, the moral rights issue is separate from a kind of a spirit of nationalism to protect the filmmakers in each individual country from being overrun by foreign product. Now that's a separate issue.
But although I think the directors are basically in sympathy with the concept that every country should be able to project their own cultural identity out there. On that point, I think that we all agree.
I'm very sympathetic with that because I think that's very important. I have been championing kind of a lost cause by now, the fact that some of the greatest directors and the most talented directors come out of the UK. But the minute they get good, they go to America and they set up houses and residence there and they bring their families there and they leave their own country and they've left the British film industry kind of holding an empty plate. And that just is very symbolic for what could be happening in other countries. Australians get successful in Australia and they come to America. You see, and they make American-type movies. And I just think that everybody owes a debt to their own country to make pictures that are all about the things that shape them as a person.
Their position, which again is understandable, is what are they going to do about their own culture if it's being smothered by American culture? Now, I think it would be a real tragedy to say to people in any country, we're going to tell you what you can and can't see. I can't say that I'm in any way for that. On the other hand, I have to be in complete sympathy with them when they say, we have no Polish cinema, we have no French cinema, we have no German cinema, we have only American cinema. This is a real problem. How to solve it? I don't think people should be running so quick to solutions because this is a very tough issue. It has really finally to do with freedom in a certain way. And you don't want to leap to conclusions and say, well, we're going to fix it this way. We're just going to stop the importation of American cinema. Well, that's limiting freedoms. That's limiting our freedoms and it's limiting their freedoms. You don't want to do that.
So what do you think?
I can see the responsibility being taken by a number of directors to lead this, though, and that gives me hope. And
I think everybody will take the responsibility. I think they'll suffer, and I think they'll take setbacks for it. But it's, as I say, you're dealing with individuals. You're not dealing with, artists don't colonize, and it's the problem. And now, and also, it's very easy for me to get involved and passionate about something that we can deal with in our own group. But now we're here in Italy, talking about problems. They have a different agenda. Oh, Fred Zinnemann was told by his doctors not to take this trip, that he could not do it, and they forbade him to do it. He got up, he made a very smart, passionate address, short. He didn't confuse it with other issues, and he sat down, and then following that, here came this herd of political agenda. And Fred sat there, and he said in his speech, or in his opening remarks, and I asked him about it when we left. I said, he said, 50 years ago this same thing started, and we got together. And I said, here you are 50 years later, and I said, 50 years from now, you and I won't be here, but somebody's going to be here, and the problem is probably going to be basically the same. It's going to be money, profit, greed against art, and so I am pessimistic but supportive.
I would have to say I'm skeptical about political types who use filmmakers in this way. Because, by the way, I think a lot of filmmakers are giving you just lip flap, as they say. I mean, of course, any director or any actor, you ring them up and say, "You for this?" "Oh, sure, I'm right for it." You know, "I'm with you." Artist rights, yo. Let's be honest here. There was a certain thinly disguised, or restrained, I should say, not disguised, anti-American feeling at this Assize. Jack Lang, it came through Jack Lang's speech, and I tell you what, those Americans were embarrassed, I think. And, you know, in fact, I even have Ivan Reitman come up to me afterwards and sort of jokingly say, "I'm really Canadian, you know." And I said, "Well, I'm an Australian. I only work there. I don't even live there." We were laughing about this, but it was this. I thought what was going to happen, that we were going to put aside this, as practitioners in the American industry, the question of American cultural domination. If we were here, it's because we're concerned. And I don't think that was welcomed. Having had contacts with politicians and things off and on since the Vietnam War, I'm very, very skeptical sometimes of individuals who use a cause to further their own career or you know, image. That is not, by the way, true of Gillo, whom I think his heart's in the right place. I think he took and attempted an incredible job here. So despite my disappointment that an advantage was missed in my single area of directors, for whose, you know, rights are being fought in one area, I think it's a fight that must be continued.
As a junior member of an almost vanished generation of directors, and in the spirit of my friends and teachers, King Vidor, John Ford, William Wyler, John Huston, and David Lean, I salute you. I've come here as a witness of 60 years of making films, as a veteran of similar battles, and as a member of the Artist Rights Foundation in America, to assure you of our fervent support. Your spirit is one of the last barriers defending our art from total strangulation. Above all, maintain unity in a world which is trying to commit suicide. Our goal is so important that it transcends all politics. We are faced with a mortal threat to the freedom of expression, the freedom of speech. Do not allow it to become a political football. And control your emotions. Be cold-blooded, because you will face people who are without conscience and who have the best lawyers that money can buy. They have the money, we have the moral right.
And I said, here you are 50 years later, and I said, 50 years from now, you and I won't be here, but somebody's going to be here, and the problem is probably going to be basically the same. It's going to be money, profit, greed against art. And
Above all, maintain unity in a world which is trying to commit suicide. Our goal is so important that it transcends all politics.